weren't at the earlier meeting, we acknowledge that we are conducting our business in the unceded territory of the Silks Okanagan people. As council, we recognize the importance of doing our best to build respectful, I get an echo, but relationships that contribute to stewarding the land and waters in the community with integrity and consideration for future generations. Is it still, you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. So, need a motion to adopt the agenda of this special council meeting? Who's got their hand up? Nobody. Councillor Reid and Councillor Ireland. Those in favor, and there's Councillor Campbell is here. Motion carries. We'll move on. From the May 18, 2021 regular council meeting, zoning bylaw amendments P 2021-003, and those are before you, and that is what this entire meeting is about.
Jeremy's got called out to an emergency. That's what the sirens were about. Yeah, we got enough of us.
That was yesterday.
Right. What's happened?
Don't know, people are coming and going. Is there a problem with the sound system?
Well, I don't know what that,
Mr. Mayor?
somebody said something about their sirens, and I'm not sure what that's to do with.
I believe it was Blair talking in the background. So everyone hears the side and then it's recorded.
That sound isn't coming through, Raina.
No, thank you, Councillor Campbell. I was just advising the mayor that I believe that what we were hearing was Councillor Scarrow talking in the background regarding the sirens. So an update is Councillor Mackenzie's power is out and is not able to join. We're trying to send him a link to join by his phone, but he'll have to use his data. And Councillor Kozub was called on a call out emergency. So that's what
Can I
heard.
try through here? I've never used that before.
Thanks for that, Raina.
Yeah, we're just attempting to get the mayor's audio working properly.
Okay.
No, can't get my mouse to work.
Raina, could we bring Todd in by phone? Just by voice?
Should be able to.
Yep, he can call in and listen. He says he doesn't have the link to the meeting, so I'm going to attempt to send him that, and I'll also send him the phone number to call in as well.
Can you hear me at all, Council?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Yeah, we
James.
can hear you.
Somebody do testing. I want to see if I get an echo again.
Testing.
Yeah, it seems good now. Okay, where were we? You're up, Corey?
Okay, great, thank you. And can you see my slideshow okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So, little bit of a delay to get us here this evening, but nonetheless, happy to have this to present to you. So, there's two real essential questions at this point. Do the proposed changes to the text of the zoning bylaw meet the community's current needs and reflect applicable updated provincial regulations? And would the proposed changes improve user understanding and achieve council and community objectives? So essentially, a zoning bylaw guides land use by regulating the permitted use and density of land and citing size and dimension of structures. The authority may be exercised by incorporating maps, tables, or other graphic material into the bylaw. Generally, a zoning bylaw establishes different provisions for different areas, uses, and circumstances. A text amendment is an application that can add, delete, or redefine information in specific sections of the zoning bylaw. That's what I'm proposing this evening. So a text amendment applies to all properties that are subject to the zoning bylaw provision being discussed. This report that you have in front of you outlines proposed changes to the text of the zoning bylaw, including revised definitions, general and specific regulations. The zoning bylaw has not changed substantially since 2009. Our purpose is to start the conversation, suggesting some simplified definitions and regulations to begin with, discover refinements through discussion, and create amendments that serve the ongoing evolution of our community. Proposed changes are focused on removing regulations from within the definitions themselves and putting those either in general or specific use regulations as appropriate. This will streamline the definitions and ensures that regulations are presented in a consistent format. The proposed text amendments also shift attention to land use and density away from building form for greater flexibility and building innovation. So, as I said, step one, we want to start the conversation this evening. I'm going to present to you some principles that I hope that you will agree on, but we can certainly have some discussion at the end of my presentation about that. Then we're going to open the conversation with a set of definitions and regulations that reflect those principles. I'm going to refine or talk about refining the definitions and regulations as we move forward, and this will happen perhaps this evening and perhaps on other occasions as well. The proposed changes will lay the foundation for the second step, a full review of the individual zones to ensure that they in turn are amended to respect their stated purpose and appropriate density provisions using the new language. The proposed new framework will inform in-stream applications where requested by the applicant, and in particular, we have a direct control zone under consideration, and these changes will be incorporated into that new DC zone. So the principles that I spoke of. Zoning is intended to control land use. It may also regulate building form. However, restrictions on building form limit innovation and can result in the need for zoning bylaw text amendments to accommodate new and interesting building forms. In all circumstances, taking a less prescriptive approach to form and limiting the regulations contained within a zone to land use only would allow property owners to respond to circumstances of the specific site and to respond with a variety of housing or accommodation forms as may suit over time. Basic controls on height, area, and lot coverage afford greater flexibility and foster innovation. The density of residential land uses is more important than the form of building it takes once the envelope for development is effectively described. This leaves the design aspects, the form and character, to the development permit process in accordance with guidelines established in the official community plan. And as we go forward, I think I'll be able to demonstrate to you some of the proposed changes and what I'm speaking of more specifically. For example, two-dwelling housing versus duplex, etc. So, what have we got here? So I think I'm behind myself, or my slides are backwards, one or the other. So the definitions, what we're hoping for is that the proposed changes are focused on removing regulations from definitions, as I mentioned, to either general or specific use regulations as appropriate. This streamlines the definitions and ensures that regulations are presented in that consistent format. And so we shift attention away from the definitions to those regulations and hopefully create easier to understand definitions, of course, following the KISS principle, right? We want to keep it simple. With respect to regulations, whether they are development, general development, as they're referred to in our zoning bylaw now, or specific use, they should be clear, easy to locate and understand, and succinctly outline the terms and conditions for individual uses. Now, you'll recall that I mentioned you can use a bunch of different ways of presenting information, and you'll start to see some of that in the proposed definition changes. For example, in the comparison table, you'll note that with respect to grade, we've included a diagram that hopefully simplifies the calculation process considerably. So you will note that each of the proposed changes is presented in this table. The first two columns are dealing with zoning bylaw 561 as they stand now, whether that be a definition in the first column or a specific use regulation in the second column. And it compares it with what we're proposing to add as definitions in the third column and the proposed either general or specific use regulations in the fourth column. Following that, each of those tables that I've presented you are the amending bylaws. And so it presents the same information in a different format. This is the standard bylaw format, and you can see here how that information translates. And as I said, average grade is a great example of simplifying things and then adjusting based on the new definition. Height in relation to a building or structure means the vertical distance measured from the average grade to the highest point of a non-sloping roof or the midpoint of a sloping roof, excluding the projections. And basically what the intent here is to, again, simplify it. Taking the midpoint of the sloping roof tends to average things out so that when you're looking at the height, essentially you would get the same thing whether it was a flat roof building or a building with a peak, with just the peak protruding, I guess, into that area above what we would likely classify as the maximum height. So you see it, there is a diagram included that demonstrates the various different versions of that. Similarly, another diagram indicating how you would compare the grade where you have a sloping lot in comparison with a flat lot. So including some of these things right within the bylaw hopefully will make things easier to understand. So those were the first ones. I think that was height and grade are things that we have identified at council through our discussions previously that were important. So we felt it was good to add those in at this point to get the process started. However, there are 6 other categories essentially. When Raina and I discussed the bylaws, we determined that grouping of the definitions and regulations into categories might make the whole process a little less cumbersome. So that's why you've got 7 different bylaws in front of you. Obviously, you can pick and choose from various parts of those as we go forward, but we felt it was perhaps a good way to present the information at the outset. So the next category is residential definitions and regulations, and what we're proposing is to delete single detached housing and single dwelling housing, because they mean essentially the same thing, and replace them with one single definition for single detached, meaning any detached building containing one dwelling unit occupied or intended to be occupied as the permanent or long-term residence, where permitted by this bylaw, one dwelling unit and a secondary suite. It's often a point of confusion, so it's good to be clear on that. Also, deleting multiple dwelling housing in its entirety and replacing it with a couple of simplified definitions. Multiple unit residential dwelling means a dwelling unit contained within a building that includes multiple units. And so you can see we can replace a lot of different building forms with one single definition, and we can talk to the use rather than the building form, allowing people to respond with the appropriate building form as circumstances dictate, if you will. Now, with respect to residences on agricultural land, there are a number of definitions that need to be added to the bylaw. I've listed them here as well. To complement those, there are specific use regulations that go along with those. Other uses on agricultural land, we propose the definition of agriculture, again, be simplified, meaning the use of land for the growing of crops or the raising of livestock, and includes apiculture. Now, apiculture is something that we're getting questions on. Beekeeping is becoming more popular as bees become threatened species. Many orchardists and other farmers like to encourage bees around, so we find that that comes up in conversation. So it is added here. And those, again, are complemented by specific use regulations that will speak directly to those. In this category is one particular thing. Farm retail sales was something that came up in the last few months. So just highlight that there for you. Now, accessory uses. We propose to delete accessory building, accessory structure, and ancillary, both versions. So that's 4 definitions, and replace them with 1. Accessory in relation to a use, building, or structure means a use, a separate building or structure that is normally ancillary, incidental, subordinate, and located on the same lot as the main building or structure. We can depend on the definition of ancillary in its standard dictionary meaning under the law. And in fact, we will reapply that word ancillary in another context based on some liquor license regulations. Nevertheless, this is what we propose. And again, development regulations would be updated or added accordingly. Accommodation uses, deleting agritourism accommodation and replacing it with something more simplified. I guess that's not good English. Sorry about that, guys. Nevertheless, what we would say is that it is subject to the regulations contained in the bylaw without specific reference to section numbers, so that if section numbers change, that we don't have to change it, but really recognizing that the regulations are the meat of the matter. Also deleting the very confusing definition apartment hotels, hotel, motel, and tourist cabin, and replacing it with one single definition for tourist accommodation, recognizing that no individual guest would stay for more than 240 days in a calendar year. That's what would distinguish this from full-time housing. We also recommend simplifying bed and breakfast homes to, again, just simply make reference to the regulations. So following the same pattern as the other definitions. And as well, deleting recreational tourist accommodation and replacing it with campground, again, for clarity, so that everyone's really clear on what we're actually saying there. So we're going to add specific use regulations for bed and breakfast. We had some, but we're going to add some more. Agritourism accommodation, boarding use, and short-term vacation rentals we modified as well to reflect this new language. So I think I somehow am missing some slides here. There are a number of other definitions, being care facility and congregate housing uses, food and beverage uses, assembly uses, brewery, cidery, meadery, winery uses, of which I mentioned earlier, ancillary use would be, that term would be reused with specific reference to these liquor-related uses, and we would add specific use regulations for breweries and distilleries, as they are very distinct under the building code. So those are some of the things, and I guess basically we're here. We have a number of options, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and we can see where this takes us. Anyway, thank you. That concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Questions? Councillor Gamble? Making a guess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I wish, that I could see the notes that I'd made on my screen, but I can't because we're doing the meeting, right? So I'm going to try to remember. And like, I don't know if you're looking for just to start off with, sort of agreement of kind of the principles. If you are, I think generally I'm in agreement with, the reason for doing this, for updating. I think that is a reasonable thing, and to achieve clarity and to reduce confusion. So from that point of view, I do support what we're doing here. I'm just going to run through some of the concerns, and I'll just run through them. If we can talk about these things in a bit more detail, I would appreciate it. And these aren't going to be in the order because unfortunately I don't have my screen in front of me. So I just made a few notes of what I could remember. First one is the maximum house size in the ALR, which I know that the ALR is now backtracking on their regulation, but we don't have to. And I certainly do not like to see these what I call monstrosities using cheap agricultural land for a lot. I mean, there's a beautiful house going down below me, but I'm sure if they really counted every square foot of that it would be over the 5,600 square feet. I think that should be more than adequate for a house in the ALR. So that's one of the things I didn't even see that. I didn't even see that in the regulations. And I think that as a community that has a large amount of ALR, we might want to look at that. Another thing that I found that seemed odd to me, the size of the bathroom in the agricultural accessory buildings. Is there a problem? Oh, James, I keep you.
I want to see if Bill had his hand up or not.
Oh, okay. The size of the bathrooms, it's 3 meters, and I checked what that is. It's 32 square feet. So I don't know, but that seems a pretty small bathroom, and I don't know why it has to be that small. It just seemed unreasonable. Okay, and that was one thing. Then the other thing is the 2 hectare. The 2 hectare minimum for locating seasonal agricultural workers. And of course, you've got varying sizes of max units. I'm not sure sort of the detail on why those were there, but I did notice at the beginning there was a different, when the very first discussion of it, that there was an inconsistency in the size of the properties. It's much less. I think it's 0.4 of a hectare, so 1 acre. So I don't know why. I just mentioning that I spotted that. But I have a query about the large size of 140 units on 2-hectare properties for ag use, without it coming for, you know, special consideration of variance. I have concerns about it, that we wouldn't have an opportunity to have maybe a public discussion. And if there is a public discussion, if that's going to rezoning, that might be a good thing. But it just seems, I guess I have a concern about using agricultural land in our community. I mean, and I don't know, I suspect that we have some tax benefits, and that's why these people are choosing to locate their, you know, large units in our community, but choose to use those workers outside our community. And I think we have to be careful of that. We have to be a bit mindful. We don't want to be taken advantage of as a community, because I think we're more interested in using our properties, you know, for agricultural use. And if it's legitimate, if those farmers are farming within our community, it's fine. And even if they had a small amount outside, but if the majority of their farming is outside, that for me is a bit of a red flag. Why is that happening? Okay.
And I'll get you.
Okay, I've just got a couple of other things while I'm just, and I'm sure other people will say yes or no to these things too. Sightlines, I did not agree with the use of averages, and I don't know if that's just the definition or, anyways, I don't like it. And I don't like the use of averages for grades either. I think that's really dangerous and doesn't achieve, both of those things to me don't achieve what we're looking to achieve. And I just think we maybe need some discussion on those things. And then I didn't see anything on the steep hillsides and discussion of our retaining walls and you know, how this development of steep slopes is causing us to, first of all, use a lot of conservation land, what I would consider to be conservation land. And we have now, you know, sort of walked away from some of that, and has long-term consequences for our community. And then on the bed and breakfasts, I did read your note about parking, but it's been raised to me, so I'm just going to put it out there. And then the other thing on agriculture setbacks, those agriculture setbacks, I didn't see them in there at all, and big concern, because when you rezone a property, if you don't have the setbacks in there, you know, we get things like covenants that get removed and different things that happen, and so we don't really have clarity on it. So, you know, that's something that I think is, I would think it should be at rezoning that there's clarity on that.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment on a couple of those things?
Yeah, yes, Corey?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so first off, yes, there's lots of things that you won't find here, because this is sort of our first set. Here's the first things that we're looking at. We have a lot of things to look at.
It's a big zoning bylaw.
Yeah, so we're just getting the iterative process started. So I have made notes, and you'll see me taking notes. That's great. And I think that probably, you know, those things that you raised to me, well, then we can put those higher on our list of things to take care of. At this point, what my intention is to present the bylaws for first reading to council. That basically gets them on your table, and so you have seen them. Now I would like to refer them out to all of the various agencies and interest groups to start the conversation. Now that you have seen them, because I think it's important you see them first. And then we can talk about what those comments are as we get the feedback, and we can make some adjustments. With respect to the averaging for heights, I think the important thing to remember here is that we talk about making the definition simpler, but then we will adjust the regulations and or the height requirements in the various zones to reflect the outcome that we want to achieve based on that simplified calculation method. We spend a lot of time trying to calculate and come up with different things. It shouldn't take 6 pages to explain how to calculate height. And so I hope that we can have a fact sheet that has 1 page, not 6 pages. And so that's my intent is, yes, I totally get that we might have to make adjustments to other things in due course. Once we sort of got these basic building blocks in place, and then we can look at what is the impact and what do we need to do to make sure that we're achieving the outcome that we hope to achieve. So thank you for those comments.
Okay,
Yeah, great.
okay, thanks.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Claire.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Corey, for the presentation. I was trying to get in a little quicker. I don't know whether this. Yes. I know. Just as a point of order, the attachments are not available to the public. They are not on the website. So for 2 reasons, I feel really uncomfortable discussing this at a council meeting. I would have really preferred to see this come to a strategy session. I think, to me, there are too many questions at the present to at a very, very detailed level, and then not to have it available to the public in the attachments. I thought it was just my version on Compass that I can't see past page 5, but I checked on the website just now, and it's not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or whatever they are not available on there. So I don't know whether we should check that. So I can carry on the discussion, but I just feel really,
Tanya.
this is, yeah.
Yeah, Tanya, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the attachments. I'm not sure why those aren't on the, I just heard from Willie and she says they are on there.
Okay.
But regarding this, you know, this type of session in a special council meeting versus a strategy session, you know, staff talked about this a lot actually, and one of the concerns that we have with a strategy session is they are, 1, not recorded, so it's very difficult for us to go back. There's no minutes taken, which means it's very difficult to go back and try and decipher what was said, because we're trying to make our own notes on things and discussions that happen, and there's no recording of it. So if there is any kind of direction provided, which often in strategy sessions there is direction, there's no resolutions for sure, but there is direction provided by council. And this is very, very impactful on property owners and developers, that there's nothing for us to point back to when this came forward in a different format. So for the public to be able to hear the discussion, it's, for staff, we felt quite strongly actually that it would be better done in a council meeting forum where it was recorded, and developers or homeowners or whoever, property owners, could actually go back and listen to the conversation regarding how direction was provided from council on these issues. You know, these issues are certainly issues that council's talked about at length on a number of different occasions, on a number of different files within the community. So we did feel like it was really important that there be some kind of record of this conversation for people to hear. I see Jamie has some comments too.
I'm just going to go and say, when I open the PDF from the district's website, I just get 7 pages. So I've gone onto the link, I've clicked on the agenda PDF, which says special PDF, and I get the 7 pages, and I do not get the attachments.
Okay, we can definitely look at that, but I don't know if Jamie had some comments about this being a strategy session versus a council meeting as well.
Okay,
Yes.
Jamie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do want to be, I won't go on for too long because I know there are other there are councillors with comments to make in this regard. You know, and just building upon our chief administrative officer's comments, Staff did consider the potential for a strategy session, but also knowing the number and not only the depth but the breadth of issues that that staff will be bringing forward to council in terms of the zoning bylaw review. Council may recall the discussion around that project was to take that project as an in-house exercise and deliver that in-house utilizing our own expertise and capacity and understanding of the local bylaw issues and bringing them forward, but bringing them forward in a way that, utilizing this public venue, it's just about making this an iterative process and innovating towards something better. And, it's not that staff are bringing forward the final option, but bringing forward options for consideration, and council's discussion in public forums is part of that process that makes even better policy. And so that was part of the discussion in terms of advancing this. Staff are definitely welcome staff are in the position of welcoming council's feedback, and council is at the full discretion to advance this, to make additional comments and make additional notes, but it was deemed that doing that was best in a public forum.
Okay.
Councillor
Yes.
Ireland, I got Councillor Ireland. He had his hand up long ago.
Yeah, first thing I'm gonna do is, regardless of our CAO's comments, I still agree with Councillor Reid. This package, it's a lot. And to present this all at one meeting, and if strategy sessions, they are public, if they're not recorded, why don't we record them then? To have that freewheeling discussion, I think a lot of people would much more appreciate it than watching this, because this is a terrible way to talk about this particular issue. And you talk about worrying about developers and builders. Well, if we're talking about height and grade, what that's affecting is our community. And that's what's hurting our community and the people that already live here. The number of properties around here, my next door neighbors is a classic example. If it obeyed the things the way the council envisioned, that house would be about 3 meters, 4 meters shorter. So, new houses on the lake that are blocking all the view of the lake from the sidewalk, from everything. So, I'm not so concerned about the developers in this. I'm concerned about the community and how we protect the community. So, going forward from that, Councillor Gamble raised a number of good points, and I would echo all of her concerns. Particularly the ALR house size. The pressure on the ALR to change that ruling that they had is coming from multi-generational families in the Surrey area and Langley area, which is a totally different picture than what's happening here. What's happening here is it's cheap land, as we've seen with numerous properties along the lake. It's cheap land where you can build a monster house, and you might plant a couple apple trees or some grapes to try to cut your taxation on the lesser of the things, but that's what it is. In terms of grade, going back to Councillor Reid's comments, that grade, that's a huge topic, and that could be a meeting in itself, because we've been talking about that since I've been on council. We had a strategy session on this 5 years ago, and not one of those things was implemented, and none of council's opinions, nothing happened at all. And so we're still going on, and we're still letting those things happen to our community. And it's, quite frankly, it's not fair. So, I've read through this fairly extensively. There's lots of things in that, but unless we have a free and whole discussion about grade, that's a massive one. Again, the agriculture, Councillor Gamble raised a number of points. There's more points. I also really want to emphasize the point she made about the farm worker housing, farming in our community. And the last time we discussed farm worker housing in terms of numbers, and we were going to try to align with what other areas in the Okanagan were doing, we were talking about farms having accommodation for 40 workers. Well, in this proposal, it still shows the ability to have accommodation for up to 140. And you know, this is commercial farming in a big way. It's just not what a small rural residential community needs. So there's that. Tourism, you know, when you get to the tourism and the you know, like I appreciate the text and the changing and the simplifying the language. That all makes a lot of sense to me. You know, all those different types of dwellings. I mean, very complicated, not necessary. Tourist accommodation, again, all those little different kinds of definitions, probably not necessary. But tourism accommodation is another thing, especially when we're talking about Airbnb or that style, short-term. I guess it's not Airbnb, that's a brand name. Short-term rental accommodation. In the note that you sent that Corey sent out to all of us explaining the difference, it seems to me that council's wishes weren't followed there either. I mean, we had a, you know, this is before you came, but we had a strategy session. We talked about short-term accommodation. We talked about people having to live in that so that people couldn't buy houses and just rent them out and buy another house and just rent it out to short-term rental accommodation. And if what I'm reading and what you've written is correct, that's not what we've done. And that's what we talked about, and that's what council's wish was at the time. So I can't possibly understand why we're at where we are where we're at. I just don't understand it. That's almost the most basic rule in short-term accommodation, is to stop people from buying houses and renting them out short-term and then buying another house and buying another house, fostering this huge housing crisis that we have. And almost every city that exists has this as a basic rule. So I have no idea where we're at, and I'd like to have further in-depth conversations about that. But as far as, you know, some of these issues could probably be lumped together, but I have so many comments on grade. I could be here till midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rather us spend, whether it's a strategy session or another special council meeting, if everybody really feels that's the way to go, but I personally don't, and talk about this, because there's so many issues in there that we have to sort out. And you know, we need to understand why. We need to understand why. Why, you know, for instance, if we're talking about the 10-degree slope, why is it 2 meters? If we're talking about flat roofs versus peak roofs, why? And maybe that's a great little average, or using the averages, why? You know, are we trying to, what's our goal? Are we trying to, let's let everybody do what they want? And, you know, I kind of take exception to the comments at the beginning about innovation, because I don't see what's innovation. I see what's people using the rules to benefit themselves and make it not so nice a community to live in. Not so nice that now you used to have a view and you don't have it anymore, right? So I take a bit of exception to that. So I would really like to see us break these things down and talk about them, understand what they are. I think that, you know, when we're talking about the care homes and those things, I mean, that probably that, and, you know, there could be a number of issues lumped together, but I don't see that grade can be one of them that's lumped with the others. And I think also that if what you say in that note about short-term rental accommodation is true, that's something, again, that's greatly impacting the community, and we have to have better solutions than what we have.
Yeah, thank you. Corey, I'll take you, and then I've got Cara and Bill.
Can I speak too as well, James?
Who?
That's Todd.
Todd.
Thank you. Sorry
No,
about that.
We heard
Yeah,
Oyama
just
was
with
cut
respect
off.
to the short-term rental and that fact sheet reflects what's in the zoning bylaw now. I wasn't proposing to change that. I assumed that you had a fulsome discussion of the short-term rental topic, and because we have so much to attend to, I didn't intend to address that at this point. We do have a lot of changes to discuss, and it is going to be a heavy load to get through for everybody. But I think it's really important that we make a start. And so that is my intent here more than anything. And with respect to keeping things simple and then figuring out what we can do to make it really clear what our outcomes are that we're looking for through regulations, so that we do achieve the outcomes that you're looking for. Certainly our existing definitions, being very complicated, are not giving us the right result. So we need to find another way, and that's what I've proposed.
Good, thank you.
I'm not, again, I think I said I support making the text and those things less complicated. And there's lots of wordage in there that you've changed, which is great. Simple, it's a kiss.
Yeah.
But I would say that I certainly didn't have the impression that we had allowed short-term rental accommodation people to rent out their house and not live in it. That was one of the key principles that we talked about at the discussions that we've had. So if it's not the case, then I want to have that discussion again, because that's killing our community. It's killing this community right down here for sure. If people can buy houses and then fully rent them out, it destroys your lifestyle. So we might as well just abandon Okanagan Center and give it up to all those people who want to rent everything on a weekly basis, because that's what we're doing. Okay. So I think we better have a discussion about that, and we better have it pretty quickly.
I'll get to you, Jamie. I got Cara, Bill, and Todd. Cara, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you. So I completely agree with Councillor Arlington in bringing it back to the why. And I think when we look at all of the changes proposed, there are some that do need that greater exploration of the why, so the height and the grade, and there may be others in there that are simplifying the language, and we can break them out a little bit more for what needs an in-depth discussion and what is kind of a checkbox from everybody to say, yes, this is the right track. My concern, okay, I'm just gonna go this one by one. When you opened the conversation, you'd mentioned that this will apply to in-stream applications, but in previous discussions around maybe certain industries that are based in Oyama, we were advised that any changes to the zoning bylaw do not apply to in-stream applications. It is the bylaw at the point of when they applied. So could you just clarify that for me?
Different bylaw, yeah. Go ahead.
Certainly. Certainly. So when a bylaw changes, the Local Government Act allows in-stream applications to use the existing bylaw as it stands for 1 year from adoption of that new bylaw. So it doesn't last forever. It is in accordance with those bylaws at the date of application for 1 year from adoption of the new bylaw. However, an applicant can choose to ask to be considered under the new bylaw provisions if they feel it is to their benefit. And we do have a number of applications in stream at the moment that will benefit from these new simplified definitions and regulations. And as such, we anticipate that they will want to be using those. A large part of this is it doesn't make sense for us to be inventing new zones or making wholesale changes until we've got the principal building blocks that we really want to have in place there, and then we start building. So
okay,
it is both those things.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification. So my second point is something you'd mentioned about the height, which was we're going to change to the average. The proposal is to change to the average grade with the midpoint of a pointed roof, and at a later date, then look at the height elements for each zone. However, my question would be, in the middle of that, then somebody can take advantage of both the increased grade measurement, because you're measuring it off average, and the reduced height of the building, because now we're measuring it off the apex, and still stick with the 8-meter maximum. So they're getting the benefit each way.
So
Before
what
we
my
have a
inten-
chance to change.
Right.
One,
So my
Result-
intention is that before we adopt these definition changes, we also initiate and come to the point that you're ready to adopt those changes to the zones to make sure. So we will make them work together. But because there's so much to discuss, we'll start with the building blocks. We'll add those additional pieces and we'll coordinate adoption of the changes to happen at the same time so that we don't leave a gap that people
Okay.
can take advantage of.
But
So
that makes perfect sense, but it also brings it back to Councillor Ireland's comments. It's very difficult to hear the why now, because the why is coming later when we start to do those detailed changes. So without that long range view at the very start, it makes it very difficult, because we're putting the building blocks together, but we don't know what we're building. So we've got all of these blocks we're being asked to approve, but we've got no idea at the moment what they're going to build. So I think, to me, I would go back to Councillor Ireland's comments, is I need to see, for me personally, I need to see what we're building, and then I can say, oh yeah, the building blocks go in this order and take us down this line to our end result. So that's just my comments.
Okay, so I think I had focused my why, or my reasoning at this point was all about the KISS principle. And I really focused on that at this point. But absolutely, we can have a conversation about what the outcome is that we want to achieve with those things, and how does this fit in? And that's absolutely a conversation we can continue to have moving forward. And think about ways that we might consider that
but first,
outcome,
we all
defining
have
that outcome.
the building block.
And that, yeah,
You need that. I've got Bill and Todd and then Jamie. And then I want to comment. Bill, where are you? There
I'm
you are.
right here, and actually Todd was ahead of me. If he wishes to take the floor, he can.
Well, I didn't see him. I thought.
Okay, I'll just say what I have to say real quick, because I don't have a grab. I've been very interested in the conversation. And I would like to go back to the topic of whether or not this should be discussed in a public meeting, or whether or not it should be discussed at a strategy meeting. I completely agree with Tanya that this should be discussed in a public meeting. I completely agree with Cara that the attachments should be available to public on the computer, and I hope that they are. I just don't know that. The reason I think that part of our problem is, as Councillor Ireland has pointed out to, we had a strategy session several years ago, and we asked for specific things, and because it's a strategy meeting, we wind up with 4 or 5 staff members, different notes that mean different sorts of things, and we really can't move forward from a strategy meeting. So I'm only in favor of public, fully blessed council meetings to discuss something like this with. That doesn't mean we couldn't take part of it, Corey, like the height, and just have a discussion about the height or any other contentious parts of it on a strategy level. But I think this council has to understand how bylaws evolve through the 4 readings and through the public hearing. That's the time when things get added, amended, changed, fixed, and forgotten. And if we don't go forward with first readings, well, we don't need to do that tonight, but I mean, if we don't think about moving forward through the steps that are legislated by the provincial government for us to take, and using those steps to accomplish the things we want, then I think we're missing something. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Todd, wherever you are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm definitely hearing the same things over and over here. And one thing that I would say that is a little concerning for me is that we were trying to put this whole thing through on on a council meeting when it clearly there's way too much here to bite off. You could have filled this in on one meeting all by itself. So I'm all for bringing it into the public limelight so that it's recorded and everything else, but it quite clearly has to be done in smaller bites. You know, the height and the grade thing, it should be all by itself, because when I'm reading this, I'm seeing lots of holes and lots of opportunity for this to be abused. And as somebody who had their view taken away of the lake because of this loose rules that we currently have, I do not want to see any opportunity for them to take advantage of this. So this needs to be shown quite clearly what it is, and we're not there yet for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So as far as the other things go, you know, there should also be separated, that Airbnb and the that end of things should be separate again. There's just too many things here to handle in one go. I think it's very distracting to have too many things on the plate at once. So I really think you need to narrow this down and make this way simpler to make sure that we try and get it right the first time.
Good. Okay, thank you, Jamie, and then Raina.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. And just to clarify, you know, I think in terms of staff's approach in this regard is knowing that the zoning bylaw review process is going to be very iterative, and that we may be back in 6 months from bylaw adoption on if something were to be adopted, even tweaking it again. And maybe that is the reference to the innovative approach, whereas not setting a bylaw in 2007 and then you know, trying to update it as comprehensively as we must now. You know, the list of bylaw matters in the zoning bylaw right now for review is in the range of 125 to 150 amendments. So it is substantial, and some of those, as mentioned, are greater than others. Height and grade, for example, we know are major pressure points. So we definitely appreciate and understand where council is coming from in that regard. And just wanted to give you some context as to where this came from. And but definitely fully appreciate council's perspective in this regard, and maybe taking some of these matters back and into different venues. But part of this was putting it out there for discussion at this point, and certainly happy to unpack individual aspects of it, or maybe determine which ones we could bring forward in a group, and which ones may need to be separated. And all of this feedback included in this discussion this evening is valuable in the process, even if a reading is not provided. So I just wanted to comment in that regard, and then thank council for their comments so far. And if I may just quickly clarify, the short-term use does require that the operator operate it within their principal residence, which they occupy for the majority of the year, as identified through their claiming of the homeowner grant.
Raina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick strategy session and a special council meeting. If we had a strategy session and we posted it and we recorded it, we might as well call it a special council meeting, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. So there's very little difference if council's concerned about this. This is more available to the public and more transparent, being presented as a live meeting. Once we're allowed to have people back in person, I think maybe Councillor Island, that may be more conducive to what you're looking for, is to having that robust discussion in council chambers with everyone here, which hopefully we're moving closer to. And it sounds like we'll have a lot more discussion on these zoning bylaws. So we'll most likely have that opportunity. But again, I would recommend that they be special council meetings so that we have that transparency available. And as far as the attachments go, you're correct, Councillor Reid, they're not attached to this meeting. They were attached to the May 18th meeting, where council made a motion to defer them to this meeting. So just the agendas, just the report is attached and not all the attachments A through Z or whatever number there are. So I would just recommend that council not give any readings to the bylaw tonight, but they can certainly have that discussion because the document is available publicly.
Okay, thank you. And I agree that this was way too much for a single council meeting. And but I think we had to get it started and at least get it where we can see some results, because a lot of our bylaws and our attempts at getting things right were done in a hurry shortly after incorporation. And we thought, well, let's get at least something on paper. We did it recently with the agritourism. We had nothing in place when the province announced that people could put mobile homes on their agricultural land. So we had to get something in place, and it wasn't great, but we can amend it at times, and that's. But grade, my goodness, is indeed a whole council session. It's been around since I started on the regional district 40 years ago. They were talking about who determines grade and how. So we have to do it more slowly, the small bites, as someone said, and as we did with trying to close building files, that they had so many that didn't get dealt with for so long that we could get 50 of them in one night if we didn't take them a few at a council meeting when it wasn't too crowded. So we really do have to get started on this and come up with the results that are not ambiguous, that people can't take advantage of to try to get things their way in greater time. So I don't know where you want to go with it. We can do it like a strategy session, and as Councillor Ireland said, record it anyway, so that staff knows what we have said, and that can be public, because they are public, but nobody attends, so, or not much, but unless they have an issue they want us to deal with, but in an informal manner. So I don't know where you want to go with this tonight.
Councillor Ireland has an idea.
And I have Councillor Gamble before him. So I'll take Councillor Gamble right now.
I think Tanya has a comment first.
I didn't see Tanya's hand at all.
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you?
Well, it's down now, but.
That's okay. We can certainly hear from council, and then I have a suggestion on a way forward here.
Okay, so you're up, Councillor Gamble.
Okay, and I just want to say that I really appreciate your process of bringing this to us in a special council meeting. I think it's excellent. And I think introducing these issues, I am thinking that the reason you brought these issues forward, the why, is that these are the ones that are sort of the more pertinent ones that continue to come up. I think, and maybe that's you know, what we need to hear when things come to us, because those are the areas where we need to tackle sort of first, which makes sense to me, makes good sense. Obviously, we have some different ideas on it, and so it's quite obvious that it's going to be a little longer discussion than maybe just, you know, 20 minutes or something, because these are issues that are complex, some of them. And it's great to get them simple. That's your challenge. and we're not the expert on that. we can give you ideas maybe, and we're willing to work with you on it, you know. But I just want to mention that I was involved, as James and maybe Bill, when we did bylaw 561, and that was with the previous, not Alberto DeFeo, but the previous administrator before him, Randy Rose, and we spent months and months and months on that zoning bylaw. But we did have a number of community meetings on it to ensure that, people had their opportunity for input. And I think, we progressed. It's a little different. We've got different ways of doing that. But certainly special counsel is an effective way of people having the opportunity to view it. And if they're busy and can't join in on Tuesday night, they can still see it, which I think is extremely valuable. So I think, we're on the right track, so let's not worry that we're not. But as far as a decision tonight, if we're unsure that people had an easy, clear way to seeing those attachments, that's a concern. I know I had to go to last week's agenda. And that's where I found the full package. I didn't know where else to find it. But I knew that I'm on council. I don't know if, the ordinary citizen would think that.
I'm ordinary.
Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point that I'm not in favor of hiding these meetings from the public. A strategy session, as I was aware, and I certainly don't have the experience of Councillor Gamble or Councillor Scarrow, but since I've been here, that's what we had. And we were informed that they were public and that the public could attend, and not very many people ever did, but some people did attend at certain things. But if that's not the way, and this is the way, then, probably a conversation about that should have taken place a little while ago. If what we were doing wasn't the correct and most above board way to do it, so be it. However, I think everybody else has said it. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm looking to Tanya to say, okay, I'm not quite sure that any of the options really works, except for maybe perhaps B. But yeah, let's find a way forward, because there's a lot to unpack in each one of these things, and I don't want to wait. I don't think it's fair to our community, as we've talked about, things like grade. I mean, there's houses being built every day, and there's a house down here in Okanagan Center that is atrociously tall. They've been able to use the height regulations to build it tall, so now people who walk down the road all used to have a view of the lake, and now they don't. The people across the street used to have a view, and now they don't. And when there's only one house between you and the lake, that's not very good. That's not a very good outcome. And we're certainly not protecting the people in our community if that's the way it goes. So I don't want to wait for these things. I'm happy to have special council meetings coming out, but again, one of the reasons we could get more meetings in is that we had strategy sessions before council meetings. So maybe we can have early special council meetings. I don't know what the answer to that is. I'm not against them being public, and quite frankly, why they weren't recorded or minutes taken, I have no idea. I mean,
to save staff.
Once we sat there and we said, at the close of the meeting, did staff get all of that? I think many people say that. I can recall Councillor Gamble saying it. I can recall the mayor saying it. So, I think those of us on council are assuming that everybody's got it. So if they don't and it needs to be recorded, then let's have a formatted meeting where it is recorded and public and more public if that's the way. But I'm looking for Tanya to get us out of this meeting.
Yeah. The reason the strategy session was not a formal record of what went on was because everything then had to be, we were doing committee of the whole, which meant that you had to record everything and everything had to be typed up ready for the next, and we didn't have a lot of staff, and we had long meetings when we first started, or at least when I was first mayor with Councillor Gamble and Councillor Scarrow. So we we spent a lot of time, and we didn't have much staff. So the strategy session was to get stakeholders or whomever wanted to attend this session, and we could discuss things informally, and then we take direction from that, and staff would take direction from it. But there wasn't anybody could come back and say, well, you had a meeting and you did something that we didn't know about. It wasn't that we were trying to hide anything. It was just that we were trying to be a little more efficient in getting things done so that we could get on to more things. And we're still discussing grade. And, you know, it really, that's only a minor thing. What we want to do and have always said we want to do is protect sensitive areas, protect as much green space, and have that rural atmosphere, which you can have when you've got a whole lot of orchards helping us out to provide that rural atmosphere. So, but the building aspect and how people are fudging our bylaws in terms of grade or whatever else it is, and cutting down trees when they really shouldn't have been. We still don't have a firm penalty for that. So there are things that need doing, and unless we get started, and I agree that we should take them in small bites, and we'll get grade could be one whole item on an agenda. Maybe it'll get people phoning in or coming in, or eventually, maybe by the end of July or something, we can have more people congregating. But in the meantime, we'll deal with, I don't know if we even have to make a resolution to do anything with what we've heard so far, if you're not happy with the way it is progressing. The only other thing I'll say about grade, and I've been so long trying to be gender neutral, that we in archaeology use cultural modification. We don't use man-made, and in grade there's comments about the natural grade versus man-made grade, and I would prefer cultural to man-made, because it could be machine-made and not man-made, and a lawyer could play with that, or it could be done by a female machine operator, and it's not man-made. So anyway, cultural is neutral. But where do you want to go? I mean, apart from home.
Tanya, let's go different.
So I appreciate all of council's comments, and I think just to address a couple of things, you know, I don't think we certainly aren't suggesting that strategy sessions need to go away entirely either. We think that there is definitely value in strategy sessions for some issues. So for example, the Mountain Bike Club wanted to come and talk to council about where they were going, what they were doing, and some of their projects and some of the interesting things they're working on, and not looking for a resolution necessarily from council, but just to share information. And we think that strategy sessions are a perfect place for that. It's more of a special interest type of group, not necessarily needing to be recorded. There was a little bit of direction from council, but more just we support the work that you're doing, and we'd like to see some more like that. So that we think is absolutely relevant for things like strategy sessions, but discussions around bylaws, especially impactful bylaws like our zoning bylaw, we do think needs to be in a special council meeting. So with that, we certainly can have special council meetings in place of strategy sessions. So often on Tuesdays, we start early, have our strategy sessions, and then go into our regular council meeting. We can absolutely have special council meetings on those days as opposed to strategy sessions. Some of the challenges we're facing right now, we've seen some very, very heavy agendas. There's lots of things that need to go in front of council. We also have seen a lot of Tuesdays taken up with various things scheduled, so not just every other Tuesday, like every Tuesday. and which is challenging, I know, for council and for staff. I've certainly heard it from both sides that going every Tuesday from 4:30 to 9 is a long day. So we are trying to be respectful of that as well. And I'm certainly getting the pressure from some of the staff in certain areas going, well, I got things that need to go forward to council too, and pressuring to try and fill those Tuesdays up. And I've tried to resist because I know it's really hard on everybody. So where does that leave us? Certainly as staff, we can try and prioritize some of these issues into special council meetings and look at that. We have things that are on our list, things like the ICSP update, which has taken up a special Tuesday. The OCP update, which has taken up a special Tuesday, and I think council can choose whether or not they'd like those things to advance in front of the zoning bylaw, because certainly those Tuesdays could be consumed by discussions around the zoning bylaw as opposed to the ICSP or the OCP. And I'm not picking on those ones in particular, but they are high-level strategy documents that impact a lot of the same issues. So maybe there is a valid point pushing some of that around. There is always going to be other things as well that we need to bring forward to council. So for example, I was just looking at the list. We have things like the liquid waste management plan steering committee. Just an update for council, most appropriately done probably in a strategy session so council can ask some questions, and that goes ahead. But so there is some other things we're trying to fit in there as well. Now with these ones in particular, we heard a number of them suggested that they needed to be on their own. There's some that could be combined. We have a resolution tracker that council has access to, that staff have access to, that we actually use to keep track of things. It would certainly be my preference if council went through this list. So for example, grade and height, and made a resolution that they wanted to see that on a separate meeting. That way, when it was completed, we could tick it off and that resolution goes away, but we've got a record for staff and for council of all the separate ones that they'd like to see on separate meetings or tackled separately, for example, or if there's some that we can lump together and say, or there's something in there that, yeah, we're good with, I don't know, whichever one it is, then we can hear from council. My understanding from the discussion is that most of these ones will require more discussion. And I think that's okay. That's good, right? I think that we can come to that conclusion that almost everything on this list needs more discussion, and council can make the resolution to push it to a separate meeting. But if there is anything that we think that could be advanced, or there is some general feedback, and then it's probably good, we certainly don't have to pass a resolution on it, but it could be just pushed to another meeting and could be considered at another meeting. So I will leave that for council's consideration and feedback.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tanya. Anybody else? What do you want to do for tonight? Councillor Reid. Oh, am I
You're
muted?
muted.
Sorry, yeah, I just was in another document, had to get back again. Can I nominate care homes? That seems to be okay, care facilities bylaw. And for me, actually the residential uses, if we could just get a clarification on how, let me see, where is it? Semi-detached housing, which is currently defined as 2 households living together, will be renamed under multiple unit residential building, which is minimum of 3 households. I just can't square that circle. Then as far as I can see, that one seems to comply, and other councillors may disagree, but seems to comply with the keep the KISS principle. Because it doesn't really go into some of the things that we were discussing around the tourist accommodation. So those 2 for me would be something I would be happy going with, either resolution A or B, but again, I'll put that out to the rest of council.
Corey, do you want to comment? And Blair? Got you, Corey? Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I apologize. I keep turning it off because I have my door open and it echoes, so I apologize. I think that the key here, what I need to understand from council, this is great that you can pick on a couple that you're feeling fairly comfortable with. Remember, this is just to get them on the table so that I can refer them out to all the various agencies and whatnot. So these are absolutely, things that we can revisit and completely change before second reading if you want to, should the comments come back in that way. So if you decide you want to give some first reading and others not, I need to understand whether you want me to hold back on the referrals or whether I should be sharing these more broadly and starting to accumulate other agency and interest group information to inform our further discussion. I think that's principally why I was just shooting for first reading tonight, just so we can start to share.
I from my point of view, I would just say, if we're going out to other agencies, we need to be pretty clear on what we're referring, because we're asking them to put time into reviewing the information as we are sending it to them, not as we are sending it to them and then possibly amend and then resend it to them. So in respect of their time, as much as staff's time as well, I think we need to, if we're going to send it outside, we need to be pretty confident that we are 95, pick a number, % of the way there, and we're not going to make a fundamental change that would then change an agency's viewpoint on it. So that would be my point.
All right, thank you for that.
And I have Councillor Ireland and then Councillor Gamble.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with Councillor Reid. First off, that lumping those two together I don't really have any big issues there, although I do agree with her comments about the uses. Obviously, grade and height needs to be a meeting. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most important thing on that list. It's maybe not the most important, but certainly the most divisive and the most difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Blair, should they be combined? Because unless you can establish grades and everybody on a slope, the big topography, unless you can establish what we determine is grade and make every developer do to that, then do we want to go 2 stories above that, 1 story above it, 9 meters, 8 meters? Everybody comes in and says, well, if I put grade down here and cut out this, then I can add more height or whatever because I've lowered the grade. But we got to figure somehow that they can't do that, or the opposite, where they fill a hollow and contend that the natural grade was way down there, and you can do whatever else up here. But so maybe the reason it's so confusing is we always attach height to grade or whatever and try to come to a solution. So that's a difficult, but that's why we have to get it started. And I think, do first reading and say what we want and see what stakeholders and or other agencies think with and keep it combined as grade and height. And what was the other tourist or
well, I didn't finish actually, so.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, so no, I wasn't kind of finished there, James.
I got your opinion.
That's why grade and height, that's why we need to have that meeting to talk about it, because it is confusing. What you just said, we can't sit here like right now, we're considering all of these things and all of the things that are packed into all of these things.
Mhm.
And grade and height is particularly contentious. You know, you've explained two situations. I can explain to you a situation where you build on a flat spot and then you backfill in against it to remove that
Yeah.
first floor. All of a
Yeah.
sudden now call it a basement, even though it wasn't existing before, and it wouldn't have been because the lot was flat, but there
Yeah.
was a hill that was close. So let's fill it into the hill and let's build a monster tall house.
Yeah.
On you go. If you measure the grade from the road, well, if the hill drops off steeply, then you end up with those 5 or 6 story houses that you have in Lakestone. And, you know, off the road, it only looks like 2 stories, but from the lake, it looks like this massive, ugly thing.
Yeah.
So that's why there's so much in that I'm not sure it should even get first reading. I mean, I don't really know. I don't really even, as long as that comes to a full and fulsome discussion, that topic in one meeting, and we get there, I think that, the two ag things, they could be grouped together. And, but as Penny said, there's some things that are missing. There's some things to add. So again, there needs to be discussion around that. Do we have that discussion, or do we give it first reading and let it walk away?
Tanya, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, I feel from a staff perspective that we're probably not really comfortable giving anything first reading tonight, given that the attachments weren't attached to the agenda. But
Yeah.
I do think that council can absolutely provide us resolutions around the, you'd like to see grade and height to a strategy, to a different meeting or a session or whatever you'd like it to be, that, a resolution to say that would be really good, probably. But certainly if there's comfort around the two that had been mentioned, which is residential uses and care facilities, perhaps that can land on a near agenda with some discussion for first reading, and we can advance those two.
Yeah, I got
So
you.
I, for tonight though, would suggest no first reading.
Penny, you're next.
Thanks. So, yeah,
Okay.
I would support putting forward, I can put forward the resolution, but I don't have to. But what I would support is having a separate meeting on grade and height to focus on that. A separate meeting on steep hillsides and retaining walls. And that might be combined with something else, but I think that those things are important enough in our community. They could be combined with conservation areas and parkland, two other things that I think merit, real discussion on land use. And then the third area to me is discussion of things, the agricultural land uses, including but not limited to setbacks, seasonal accommodation, house size in the ALR. Those are, and there may be other things, but those are the main ones that I was thinking of. I think I've heard tonight as well.
Okay.
And as far as the care homes and essential uses, that I was quite comfortable. I did not see, nothing stood out as being an issue for me in that area. So I think from my perspective, I'd be happy to see that even be advanced at the next meeting, or, if the attachments had gone, I would have said tonight, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. Blair or Councillor Aaron.
Well, Bill wanted to make a call. I was just going to make the same resolution about height and grade, and let's get that going. I think it's incredibly important. I would also make a resolution that we've tried to visit the two ag components together as soon as possible as well, along with tourist accommodation and the others. So that's where I'm at. I'd like to at least
seconder.
Sure.
And
I'll second it.
Second, okay. Councillor Scarrow, your comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going back to what you had said, Councillor Mayor Baker.
about separating grade and height. If we could find a way to establish grade first, before we even go anywhere, then wouldn't the height come directly from that measurement? And it would be a measurement done previous to any land alteration? That seems to me to be the separation of those two things, establish the one and then the other comes from there naturally. That's what I'd like to see happen. I completely agree that we're not at a place where we could do first readings tonight, and I completely support Blair's resolution.
Okay, and I have Cara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would support Councillor Ireland's resolution with the agricultural if we added food and beverage. The reason being, there are some points in there around things like breweries are not allowed to disrupt the water and the wastewater infrastructure. However, that same requirement does not apply to wineries, cideries, or meaderies. So there's a few little ones there that, hold on a second, you know, can we maybe look at not generalizing, but bringing together these sorts of things. So I have a few questions around that, which kind of impact the agricultural side of things. So I think those three agricultural things would C, D, and G kind of fit together quite neatly, which would then leave grade and height as a separate one, or 1.5, and then have care homes and the residential uses, as I think Councillor Gamble said, something that we could put forward at the next meeting with the attachments to move forward, if everybody's happy with that. So that would give us 3.
Yep. Suits me. Raina, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was just looking for some clarification actually on the 2 ag-related items, which I think Councillor Reid just clarified, was the C ag-related residential and accessory and ag-related uses. Is that what council's referring to when they're saying the 2 ag-related items?
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, and then also you had just mentioned food and beverage being added to that.
I'm not quite sure about food and beverage. I understand what Councillor Reid is saying, because there is agricultural impact there. But again, I don't want to do short shrift to the other issues of agriculture. And, you know,
we could make it a 4th one.
Well,
yeah,
does that include?
it might be a short one, right? I think it would be a short one, but I think we need to give full attention to our agricultural community. And one, I don't think that food and beverage community quite fits 100% there.
Penny, I've got you, but Corey, did you have a suggestion?
I'm just trying to sort of tick off each of the letters there. And I noticed that Councillor Ireland mentioned tourist accommodation, which is the E. Could we perhaps put E and food and beverage together? Tourist accommodation and food and beverage as a separate?
I think any that I think the real standalone is grade and height, and that could be a whole discussion at a council agenda that doesn't have too big a heavy an agenda. Some of those others could come at a different night, maybe 2 at a time, or they're combined, whether it is ag-related residential bylaws or residential uses bylaw. So any of those from A to G, if they were reported at 4 or 5 different council meetings, I think we would have time to get what we really would like to have happen. So whether, and I'm not sure if they need to have first reading before we get to that stage and give first reading to them as we deal with them in what we see as a good solution. And then it goes out to stakeholders or other agencies, so that if they don't like what we want to see, they can maybe try to get us to change our mind, but we might not, and carry on with second reading. So we'll, anyway, I think if we do them in smaller bites and get them as we want to see them before they go out, then I got Penny and then Blair, and I saw another hand. Who was it?
Kara,
So I just wanted to verify that the agricultural uses would include dealing with house sizes in the ALR. Obviously seasonal accommodation
Yeah.
and
Washrooms,
I think that was,
washrooms, Penny.
pardon?
You said washrooms. were talking
Washrooms,
about-
yes.
Well, it's already-
absolutely. That's a minor thing, but size of washrooms in the accessory buildings, which stood out as being almost punitive.
I just wanted you to know I was listening.
Yeah.
hello,
Who else was up with Cara?
that was me.
Blair, sorry.
It was Blair, then me.
That's
Well, I'm happy to go with Corey's idea. If we food and beverage and tourist accommodation together, the two ags together, grade on its own and residential uses and care facilities.
Mhm.
And that's a fairly good separation. And look at, I mean, if something goes, if we have tourist accommodation and food and beverage together and we don't finish the second one, well, then we don't do it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that makes the sense to deal with all of ag together, the tough one, which is height and grade, the easy one, and then the in-betweener. But I would hope that we would see these soon. I think they're all really important. Tourist accommodation, it's incredibly important. People talk to me about that every single day.
Yeah.
Every day I get beat about. So, they don't like the way that our communities are changing.
Right.
And I can't say that I blame them.
Yeah.
I don't like it either.
Good. Cara.
If we could,
Go
sorry,
ahead, Blair.
I just meant if we could package that into the resolutions, Raina, then that's what I would put forward. And I wouldn't want to see first reading until we actually have publicly published the stuff.
Okay. And
Okay,
Cara?
sorry.
Thank you. I would just say from the tourist accommodation, from my point of view, the things I know Blair's you and has spoken about the short-term rentals. From the agri-tourism, we've taken away the maximum number per lot. So if my calculations are correct, if you have a 4-5 hectare site, you can fill 5% of the property with buildings that are related to agritourism, which is 2,500 meters squared, which is 26,000 square feet. So that's a lot. Whereas before we had a maximum that you could have per hectare. So my question would be, I think we need some more descriptions as to what we are saying in terms of that 5% of the lot area. Yes, you can have 10 sleeping units, but that's quite a lot of lot coverage there for those 10 sleeping units. So again, it's back to that why. What do we want to see on the agritourism side? Are we talking small cabins? Or are we talking, single family homes essentially, which could be quite large if you have a larger lot size? Because previously we had, I think, a maximum that was related to the hectare level. So you could have up to 10 to a maximum of, I think it was 10 hectares or 5 hectares. But then if you had 1 hectare, you could only have 2. Where we seem to have lost that kind of granularity. And there may be a good reason for it, but again, I'm a little bit cautious that we've maybe gone a little bit too far. So that would be my one comment on tourist accommodations, and the food and beverage is just evening out the requirements. So if we're requiring it of one type of distillery or whatever we require it of everybody at the same time. I can't see a reason for distinguishing between the different types of alcohol that's produced.
Okay. Well, did you get a resolution, Raina, or Blair, you were crafting one, or?
Raina, I'm not sure if you can put a resolution up.
I don't have one typed, but I can certainly summarize it for council. Let me have the report in front of me. So looking at the list of items, so we have grade and height going to its own meeting. We have residential uses being forwarded to the next available council meeting for consideration. We have item C, ag-related residential, and D, accessory and ag-related uses being combined to their own separate meeting. And to Councillor Gamble's points, that includes house size, seasonal accommodation, setbacks, washrooms,
etc.
That was, yeah, so that captured that one.
Yeah.
Then we have E and G, tourist accommodation and food and beverage being combined and going to their own separate meeting for discussion. And item F, care facilities being forwarded to the next available council meeting for consideration.
Sounds good.
Correct. That's what I proposed.
Yeah. Good. So.
You can translate me, Raina, way to go. Not everybody can.
Councillor Reid, second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good.
Hey,
All right.
Hey, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I got one question. I got asked about I think Jeremy brought it up about Stillwater with the fruit leather place and zoning. And I'm just curious, was that all supposed to be included into what we were doing here? Or was that a separate thing? Because I could just ask what the outcome was. And I had no answer on that one.
They're on, is that the dehydrator on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Gordon.
Right now it's in the process where she is in the process of getting a approval from her strata from what Jamie said a few weeks ago, and then once she brings that towards us, then my understanding is we discuss it in council and then we either approve it or disapprove it as a council, kind of along the same line as the chicken bylaw, if I'm not mistaken. Someone can correct me.
Okay, thanks. I just wasn't sure if that was.
That's what we talked about for sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Tanya, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say, but Councillor Kozub summarized it much better than I did. So that was a good call. And I just wanted to say, I know that it was tough going into this meeting and council was feeling, and I appreciate everybody expressing their opinions, and I knew that we would be able to get through it. And I think we have a really good way forward on it. And I recognize that it was a lot, but it was one way that we thought we could get it in front of council to at least start figuring out what pieces needed more discussion and what didn't need more discussion and what there was. And I think we got that feedback. So I really appreciate all the feedback from council and any of the other pieces provided, even on the ones that we need more discussion on, because I think it certainly helps to inform the report that'll come back to council for more discussion. And that's the other thing I think that special meetings do too as well, that, oh, and I just said do and Jeremy's special meetings give us an opportunity to bring forward a report to council, which provides a written documentation of the information we're providing to council. And often in a strategy session, we don't provide written reports. They just come to council as presentations. So this provides a whole chain of information that is available for anybody that's interested in looking back to see what the decisions of council were, how we came to where we were, how the bylaw became what it became. So, and I think, I think a couple of examples have been provided tonight on where strategy sessions perhaps have failed us a little bit and haven't been successful in getting us to where we wanted to be. So hopefully this process can get us forward and where we need to be. So thank you for that.
Really good.
Thank you for making my day, Tanya.
Yeah.
That was just for you.
And that was the only item on the agenda. So special council is adjourned.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
Night, everyone.